So let's get into the time where I met this fine female officer named Tamika Jones. So, nah, dude, just follow me, man. So, around this time, I was dealing with the breakup between me and London. And, kind of depressed, nah, man, because, I was with London for a minute. But we decided to part ways. So, I was stuck in the house just moping around and shit, man. And, you know how it is when you're dealing with a breakup. So one day, low bro Platinum hit me up and was like, yo, man, you ain't been around, man. I know, you still feeling, some kind of way with your breakup between London, but you need to get out the house. So I was like, yeah, you're right. Plus, for some reason I've, been having my eye on the brand new, Bentley GT, that just came out at the time, So I was like, yo, I think I'm gonna go cop the Bentley GT. You wanna roll with me? Platinum was like, yeah, let's roll out. So, roll out, of course, set up, did what I had to do to go, to make arrangements to the car dealership. This car dealership we would get all our cars from. So, we head over to see our car dealer. This Jewish dude named Sal. Like we could just walk in, cop any car we want, all the paperwork, check out, the way Farrago had it set up, all our cars would check out, good, So, went in there, said what's up to Sal, Told him I wanted that brand new Bentley Continental GT, So he was like, ooh, good choice. So of course, he had this navy blue one, nice, should look like a spaceship. So, did what I had to do for his paperwork. Me and, Platinum, we roll out, cause we took a Uber there, so we both roll out. Brand new Bentley, I'm driving, Platinum's in the passenger seat, so we just driving, we like, fuck it, we gotta hit the highway, we gotta test the speed on this motherfucker. So we hit the highway, we're speeding. I'm listening to the best of DMX at the time, bumping that shit, blasting it, so I guess I kinda got caught up in the music, the DMX on, driving fast, bumping that DMX shit, stepping on the gas, doing about maybe, about 70, 65, then went 70, then a little bit over 70, the highways is clear this day, nice sunny day in Dallas. So I'm just stepping on the gas, driving, rocking to, the DMX. Next thing you know, whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm like, oh shit. So, pull over nice and slow. Nah, man. Of course, me and Platinum was strapped, but, being that the paperwork in the car and the license is good, I ain't think nothing of it. So I pull over, turn the music down a little bit. So, we already had our seatbelts on and shit, so, we ain't thinking nothing of it. So, next thing you know, the officer walks up. When I look up, it was a female officer, but what was crazy was, we kind of locked eyes for 5 seconds. And I remember it perfectly because at that point when we locked eyes, me and, the lady officer, that's when the DMX song was playing. How's it going down, That song was, I remember that specifically, And then that's when, I looked at her tag, it said, T. Jones. So I'm like, how you doing, officer? And she was like, how you doing? She was like, you're going kind of fast, ain't you? How fast you was doing? I was like, nah, I just bought this car, I kind of got excited. She was like, yeah, license registration. So I'm like, sure. So I get the license registration, and I hand it to her. She's looking at my ID, my license. So she asking me, what's my name or whatever. I told her my name. And, she was asking me, where I'm from. I'm like, I was like, I'm from New York, but, I've been living in Dallas, for the last 2-3 years. She's like, okay. With a little smile on her face, she said, I'll be right back. So, we chillin', Platinum, you're like, yo, that's a bad motherfucker. She was like, she fine as fuck. I'm like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's a bad bitch. You know what I mean? I'm like, shit. I was like, they making them like that out here now. And that's when me and Platinum laugh. So, me and Platinum chillin', still vibing to the, to the music, DMX still, got it playing low this time. So she walks back, and she was like, alright. She's like, alright, I'm gonna give you a break today. I'm gonna let you off with a little warning. So she hands me the paper. And then she said, you have a good day. So as she's walking back to the squad car, I open the paper, and it's her name, and her phone number. So I'm like, wow. And then that's when Platinum looked at the paper, he's like, oh shit. He's like, yo. He's like, Tony, man, I don't know how you do it, man. He was like, you that nigga though, I ain't gonna lie, man. You be bagging. So I'm looking at the paper and the number and smile to myself. Then they say, Officer Jones, she drive by slow, honk her horn. And when I look up, we both smiled at each other. We both smiled at each other. And she, drove off, man. So that's enough. I stored her number and name in my phone. Man. And then, that's when I drove off, real slow and did the speed, did the speed limit until, me and Platinum exit the highway. So, so while I'm driving, of course, I text her, let her know, this is Tony, whatever. Put my phone down. Then me and Platinum went to the block, where the crew was at, where we hustle at shit. So, we get out, we greet everybody, we chillin' on the block, Same old, same old. And of course, Platinum letting everybody know how I just bagged this badass, officer, police officer, fine motherfucker bitch. They like, what? You know what I mean? So we chopped it up and laughed about that for a minute. Next thing you know, there was a little tension on the block, it's a young kid named Short Man, that I took a liking to, he was real cool, he was from Dallas, young kid, about 17, 18 years old, had swag, kid looked up to me too, he kind of reminded me when I was young, so Short Man's on the block, and there's this nigga from Dallas named Big Gooch, a live wire, thorough ass nigga, crazy, nice with his hand, bust his gun, big ass nigga, like Mike Tyson in his prom type shit, like buff ass nigga, named Big Gooch. So, so while I'm chilling on the block, I'm like, I see Short Man, I'm like, Short Man, what's good, and da-da-da-da-da, I'm topping it up with him. He was like, I'm doing good, but he was like, this motherfucker, just took my watch. I'm like, who? He was like, Big Gooch. And then that's when everybody else was like, oh shit, cause Gooch, when he on that bullshit, whenever, Gooch get drunk, he be on that bullshit, he, be fucking with niggas. And, for some reason, he always wanted to pick on Short Man, I don't know who was jealousy, I don't know what it is, Something like he took your watch. He was like, yeah, man. So I see Gooch is, he over there, kicking it with some niggas over there. So I'm like, alright, so I walk up to Gooch. I'm like, yo, Gooch, let me holler at you, my nigga. We knew each other like, just saying what up to each other and passing me, each other like that. I'm like, yo, man. I was like, Short Man. I was like, yo, that's my little nigga, man. I be looking out for homie. I was like, yo, man, he said you took his watch. I was like, yo, man, I'm gonna need that back, cause that's my little homie. So, you can kind of tell, Gooch, he grilling me and shit, He was like, yeah. He was like, only, full respect to you, Tony. He was like, cause I know how you get down, You get busy, and all that. He was like, real recognize real. But he said, I'm gonna keep it real with you. He was like, out here in this jungle, he was like, I'm a lion. He was like, your man over there is a reindeer. He was like, so only for the strength of you, I'm gonna get a watch back. So he took the watch off and gave it to me. He was like, but, he was like, make sure he stay on the sidelines. He was like, cause like I said, man, in this jungle, I'm a lion, he a reindeer, man. He was like, hopefully, me and you won't have to bump heads or nothing like that, you know what I mean? Because, I got a lot of respect for you, Tony, but still I'm a lion out here, you feel me? Like, yeah, I hear you. Like, no doubt. So me and him shook hands. Gooch goes on by his way. I go back to Short Man. And I hand him his watch, you know what I mean? He put his watch on the house like, I was like, I see you, nigga, you know what I mean? I brush off his shirt. I'm like, fly low, nigga, you remind me of me, man. I was like, yeah, cause he was, like Short Man was short, but he was nice with the ball. He got good grades in school. He had an older brother, but his older brother got killed years ago, you know what I mean? So I just, took a liking to Short Man, you know what I mean? He stayed fly, stayed getting bitches. My nigga, so, I gave him his watch back. I'm like, yo, man, just, stay low key. But I was like, yo, if anything, I'm here, man. You know what I mean? You with me. I don't give a fuck who it is. He was like, thanks, Tony. So Short Man go on by his business. So I'm kicking it, you know what I mean, with Platinum, you know what I mean, Flame on the block, everybody on the block, we just chilling, you know what I mean. Next thing I get a text, you know what I mean, from Tamika Jones, you know what I mean, which is Officer Jones, So me and her start texting, I told Platinum, I'm like, yo, the officer, texted me, I was like, keep it on the low though. He's like, oh shit, so me and her texting, here and there, you know what I mean. So I think later on that day, she called me, later on that night she called me, you know what I mean, that's when we got, more cleaning on the phone, and then, from us talking on the phone, that's when I, found out, that she's, she told me that she, that she, grew up in Dallas, born and raised in Dallas, and, that she was like, early 30s, you know what I mean, she was like 30, 31 years old, you know what I'm saying? Her and her, quote unquote husband, been together since like junior high school, you know what I mean? And that, she said she's unhappily married. I'm trying to think how she put it. I said, she was like, yeah, she was like, as far as me, I'm 15 years unhappily married. I said, 15 years unhappily married? She said, yeah. And she said, cause her and her, husband been together since junior high school. And, the pressure of, their families, for them to stay together because of Christian values and how they both came up in the academy together, cause she's an officer and he's an officer too. But she said that her husband moved up in the ranks and now he personally, is security for Eric Johnson, which, was the mayor in Dallas at the time, you know what I mean? Everett Johnson, you know what I mean? So he's always busy. He's never home. He's always working, you know what I mean? So so she's always either at work or home by herself because, her husband, ever since he got the position to work alongside and personally be a bodyguard for the mayor of Dallas, you know what I mean? He's never home. He's busy. So, she says she be looking for things to do, you know what I mean, or people to do. And that's when we both laughed. So she was like, let me ask you something. She said, she was like, I'm a straightforward person, so let's just cut to the chase. She was like, I want to fuck you. I know you want to fuck me. I was like, yeah, how you know I want to fuck you? She said, cause you wouldn't text me back or call me. So she was like, let's just get to the the nitty gritty, as, my homegirl Big Baby would say, she was like, let's just get down to it. I'm like, alright. She was like, when can you, take an HIV test or STD test? Cause she was like, I ain't gonna lie, I hate condoms, you know what I mean? I like fucking raw. So I'm thinking, damn, but at the same time, my dick getting hard. I'm like, well, shit. I kind of said, what Tupac said about Janet Jackson, when they asked him about, the rumor of him and Janet fucking you, on camera. I said, well, shit, if that means I'm gonna fuck you, you know what I mean? I'll take full waist test. She said, okay. She was like, go take your test, you know what I mean? And I'm gonna go take mine, and then that way we'll take it from there. So, of course, it's like the next day I ran to go take my test, you know what I mean? Took my STD test, blood work, all that. She went and did the same. So once I sent her my results, she sent me her results. She said, yo, I want you to meet me at this spot here. She gave me the address. She said, just make sure you bring an overnight bag with soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, change your underwear, washcloth, towel. She said, just bring that. So I'm like, alright. So, so of course, long story short, we set up to meet each other, you know what I mean? So I pull up to this block, nice area in Dallas, nice houses and shit. So I park up. She said she's on her way there. She got caught up in traffic, so I'm waiting on the block. I'm noticing a lot of people going in this one house, this big ass nice house, this nice big house. I'm seeing black men, black women, all going into this one house, and they all seem to have like an overnight bag. So I'm like, the fuck, you know what I mean? But like, what the hell? So I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I'm seeing couples going in it, men and women going in together. You know what I mean? Like a crew of homeboys going in, a crew of homegirls going in, just, one man, one woman going by these. I'm just seeing everybody go into this one house with an overnight bag. So I'm like, what the fuck? So it was a lot of the parking spaces on the block was taken up, so she had to park around the corner. So she's walking, she's like, yeah, where you at? So I'm like, I'm in front of you. She was like, oh, you got a good spot. She's like, I had to park around, the block, cause, there's no parking. So I get out the car, she's like, oh, I see you. So she come up, fine as a motherfucker, sexy, you know what I mean? She had like this jogging suit on, but the way it fit her body was like, damn. So I'm like, alright, so kiss on the cheek, hug. She was like, yeah, so she had her overnight bag. So she had her overnight bag on her shoulder. So I'm like, yo, what you got going on? Like, I'm seeing mad people walking here with an overnight bag. She laughed, she was like, nah, she was like, I'll tell you when we get in. So I'm like, alright. So, I got the, overnight bag. She got hers, and we walk in. Nice house. Girl greets us at the door. She was like, hey, how you doing? She was like, this is the first time in. I'm like, yeah. And then that's when, Tamika, you know what I mean? She was like, yeah, it's his first time, And then she was like, oh, Tamika, what's up? They knew each other. And so she started asking me, and she was like, yeah, the cost is going to be this. Like, one of our prices. And Tamika said, I got it. So she just cashed that. The girl at the door, and she was like, all right, take off your shoes here. And, she was like, how the scenario to me. She was like, no doubt. So after Officer Jones, Tamika pays the lady at the door cash app. She said, come on, like she knew her way around, she was like, yeah, just put your shoes here. So we take our shoes off, and we put our bags down, here, where our shoes was at. And she was like, she grabbed my hand, she like, come through. She was like, follow me. So I'm following her shit. I'm looking at the ass bouncing in the tight sweatpants and shit. I'm like, damn. You know what I mean? Officer Jones looked good, and everybody knew who Tamika was. Everybody, hey, Tamika, hey, she kissing everybody on the cheek, you know what I mean? And she introducing me to certain ladies. She was like, oh, how you doing? And then, she's introducing me to the fellas. Fellas like, hey, what's up? It was like, hey, Tamika, she hugging all the men and shit. So I'm like, where the fuck? So I'm like, yo, where you got me at? And she just laughed. She was like, oh, this is a lifestyle party. You know what I mean? I'm like, lifestyle. I'm like, oh, so this is like a swinger party, kind of like, like them people that be in the Facebook groups on Facebook. She laughed. She was like, yeah. I was like, wow. I was like, when'd you get into this? You know what I mean? She was like, that, being that her husband's always, at work, she, for her to get out the house, she said she discovered it on Facebook, like one person introduced her to another person, and she got to a Facebook group. Then boom, next thing you know, she's at a swingers party and she liked it, you know what I mean? Not only she get her shit off and get the fuck with no strings attached, but it's like a getaway, you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay. So she said that her friend that owned the house, KD, he's a retired sanitation worker, you know what I mean? So he's a retired sanitation worker. He owns a house and shit. So I'm like, okay. So she introduced me to KD. Then, everybody go in the basement. So one by one, everybody got to introduce themselves and what they into. So, you might have, a lady say, well, my name is this. Bisexual. She might say heterosexual. You know what I mean? And I'm a voyeur. She like to watch. then, you might have a guy say, I'm heterosexual, of course. He's, into the ladies and, I'm just here to have fun wherever it goes. So, so Tamika was like, well, y'all know me, unhappily married, 15 years, you know what I mean? And everybody laughed with like, yeah, she was like, well, bisexual, you know what I mean? Just here to have fun and, I want to test out, my new toy right here. She wrote my leg. She was like, this is my friend Tony, he new here. And that's when one of the ladies said, oh, hey, Tony. I'm like, hey, what's up? So that's when I introduced myself, said my name Tony, you know what I mean? Of course, heterosexuals love women, and I don't know what I'm doing here. Everybody just busted out laughing. And then that's when the owner KD said, man, just, relax, enjoy yourself. We all here to have fun, you know what I mean? Because, we all just here to do our thing. You know what I mean? So he was like, everybody got their paperwork. He was like, everybody had their paperwork. Everybody should be checked out. So, he's like, if you want to do your thing, you know what I mean? Raw and uncut, you can. But he said, if not, we got condoms provided on the side. So, I kind of knew where the slinger parties went, and, I always heard about them. I've had some experience with porn, so it was really nothing new to me. So I'm like, okay. Of course, they got the porn playing on the TV and shit, you know what I mean? So I'm like, alright. So that's when me and, Tamika, Tamika and all the ladies, they go change into, like, sexy lingerie and shit. The fellas, they go change into their boxers, sweatpants. So, I just kept, what I had on, you know what I mean, which was a t-shirt, some track pants, socks, you know what I mean. Tamika went and changed into, like, this G-string, you know what I mean. This G-string underwear, top, thick thighs, fat ass, you know what I mean, greased up, I'm like, damn. So, of course, we kissing, hugging, you know what I mean. We knew our paperwork was straight, so she pulled me to the side, 'cause they had rooms. They had, like, the basement where everybody can get it in, orgy style, around each other, all different rooms. So we went to a room, and that was the first time me and, Officer Jones get it in. Me and Tamika get it in. I'm busting that ass. I'm fucking the shit out of her. She loved it, and she's screaming and hollering. I'm hitting that fat ass on the back. That shit bouncing. You know what I'm saying? She riding me, you know what I mean? I'm freaking her, I'm hitting it, then I'm squatting down, putting my face, in the ass and eating the acid pump, turn it up, tearing it up. Boom, 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 knock it down, right? So we chilling, we laying, so we go back out there, mingle. Another female, came up to me, she wanted to get down. So Mika said, she wanted to watch, so we go back in the room, get it in, boom, 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 So we had fun the whole night, knocked about. Not only I knocked down Officer Jones, I knocked down like 3 other females, Crazy night, at the slinger party, at the, spot she, took me to. So boom, so the next day, of course she go home. The husband, he's never home, so, of course she just goes home. And then I go on about my business and shit. So from there, me and Tamika would meet up and get it in at the slinger spots. But then after a while, we didn't want to keep having to pay to go, to the swinger spots. So I had, Officer Jones come, see me. Because I couldn't go to her house because, she lived with her husband even though he never did. But I'm single, just broke up with London, so I told her to come over to the condo. So she comes over, She was like, it's a nice place. She said, I never asked you what you do. I just said, well, I got an artist, my boy Platinum, he was in the car with me when you pulled me over. So she's like, alright. So of course, Tamika, starts coming over more, we fucking, all the time, So much so, my boys was like, yo, man. He was like, did you forget about the event we planned? We planned an event called Booty and Baseball. You know how they got buns in basketball? We planned an event called Booty and Baseball to where it's going to be a day where everybody calls a truce for that day. And we was going to have all the ladies come out and play baseball to where they're going to have like short shorts, booty shorts to where their ass cheeks is hanging out with socks and sneakers, baseball jerseys tied around their waist, and they're going to play baseball. You know what I mean? And the fellas just watch, so I forgot about the event, Booty and Baseball, so I'm like, oh shit, yeah. So I told, Officer Jones about the event. She said she might slide through or whatever, but she said, you know how black people are, they don't really know how to act when there's a lot of black. And she said, plus, her being an officer, she gotta watch where she be at because she don't want to get caught up in no shit. I said, no doubt. So I told her when the event was. She agreed to stop by for a second. Cool. So, of course, I invited all the girls, down to Dallas to play, to participate in this event called Booty and Baseball. So, of course, 88's gonna be there. Magnificent Tyler's gonna be there. Peach is gonna be there. Jackie gonna be there. Nisa B gonna be there. Skoka's gonna be there. Cream from Skull Gang gonna be there. Pressure Licious gonna be there. Just all girls, plus girls that I knew personally. You know what I mean? My nigga Hollywood, hit all his hoes come out. You know what I mean? Couple strippers, Buns Forever, porn star Buns Forever for Dallas. I had her come out, so mad girls is coming to play, baseball with their asses out. We already ordered the uniforms and shit, so, it's real organized. Plus, everybody that's coming, even if they had beef, is squashed for that day. You know what I mean? So everybody was to leave their guns in the car, you know what I mean? Or in that, like, you can't have your guns with you. So cool. So now, we about to have this event, Booty and Baseball. So of course all the girls is out there, ass cheeks out, certain girls twerking whenever the music is playing. Of course, once again I got DJ Bay out there playing the music. So, of course the girls, 88 and all them, Jackie and all them, all the, different girls are twerking, shaking their ass with their, baseball uniforms on, ass out, thighs out, you know what I mean, sexy, you know what I mean. So they playing baseball, everybody's having a good time. Everybody having fun, watching all the girls play baseball and shit. Plus we got the cheerleaders on the side, So, Sexy Trapper out there, you know what I mean? She's, she got on the baseball uniform, but she ain't really playing. She just, got on the short shorts and shit. So, me and Sexy Trapper kicking it, that's my, my homegirl, you know what I mean? We done did mad dirt together, so everybody's chilling, you know what I mean? So somewhere during the event, Tamika comes through, you know what I mean? Officer Jones, she come through, sexy as a motherfucker once again, you know what I mean? She comes in, short shorts on, you know what I mean? Jordan sneakers, sexy. So everybody's like, God damn, who that, you could just hit, nigga. So then, she walks up to me, I kiss on the cheek, you know what I mean? We chilling. So she was like, she can't stay long, cause her husband's taking her out, later on that night, you know what I mean? They finally gonna spend time. I'm like, oh, really, about time, huh? She was like, yeah. So we kicking it. So eventually, she stayed for like a half hour. Then she wanted to leave, you know what I mean? So I'm walking her to her car, you know what I mean? So she was like, yeah, she's gonna spend time with her husband at night, but she definitely gonna want to see me again. So she put her arms around me, we tongue kissing and shit. Next thing you know, we hearing arguing. So I'm like, what the fuck? She was like, yup, that's my cue to go. So, I opened the car door for her. She was like, I tell you, niggas, boy, don't know how to act. Then I closed the door laughing. I was like, yo, I'ma holler at you. She was like, alright. So she pulls off and she leaves because she wanted to get out of there before anything happened. She was like, I ain't doing no paperwork and none of that shit. Fuck that. So she gets about it. So when I walk back, it's a little bit of commotion. Now what happened was, this nigga Gooch was there, but apparently Gooch been drinking, so Gooch is drunk. He's wildin', you know what I mean? But he's like the bully of Dallas, so people are scared to say something to him. But he's fucking up the event because he's basically like harassing all the women and just being a bully to the niggas. So apparently what happened was he tried to holler at this one chick, and I guess she wasn't feeling him. But I guess the same chick he tried to holler at was feeling Short Man, because Short Man was there. And like I told you, Short Man's like 17, 18. And not only, Gooch, the bully nigga, is like 25. The girl that Gooch tried to holler at is like around the same age, 25 years old, but she's feeling Short Man even though he's 17, 18, because I told the nigga I sweat. So of course he's mad, he's calling the girl a bitch and that or that. He calling Short Man pussy, yo. So that's when I stepped up again. I'm like, yo, Gooch, man. I like, chill, man. This is my nigga, and plus you fucking up the event. He was like, fuck all that, that. He was like, it ain't about all that. He was like, it's about you getting in my face one time too many, man. I'm like, yo, man. I was like, you need to relax, man, because not only you fucking up the event, I told you, man. Short man, that's my little nigga. He was like, yo. He was like, I don't give a fuck. He started getting loud, so he acted like he wanted to fight. Nah, I'm not gonna fight this nigga. This nigga big as a motherfucker. Basically, registered with his hands, boxer. So I just pulled my gun out. Everybody, just staring. And everybody got quiet, because, it's a truce day. Everybody supposed to leave their guns. So I pulled my gun out. I'm like, what, nigga? So that's when Gooch put his hands up. Was like, oh, he was like, we playing that game. I was like, you motherfucking right, nigga. He was like, okay. So he started backing up with his hands up. He was like, all right. He was like, you got it. He was like, you got it. He's like, so we playing that game? I was like, yeah, we playing that motherfucking game. I was like, matter of fact, this ain't no motherfucking game, nigga. What's up? So he was like, all right. So Gooch, Goose leaves. He leaves. He walks off. So as I'm putting my gun back, in my waist, everybody's staring at me, because we all agreed to leave our guns in the car. So that's when I looked at everybody else. I said, yo, just because y'all all agreed to play Martin Luther King for the day don't mean I have to, nigga. I'm more like Malcolm X. Everybody bust out laughing. So that's when we continued the event. Booty and baseball. DJ Bay put the music back on. So we chillin'. Yeah, so we basically, we continued on with the event. Cool, you know what I mean? So eventually, time goes on. Everybody's chilling, you know what I mean? Doing their thing and shit. So, of course, me and Officer Jones, we still messing around and shit, fucking around. But now it comes to the point to where the Cornello and Crawford fight was about to go down, you know what I mean? So Farago's gonna have like something at his nightclub, to where he's gonna open up his nightclub for fight night, for Canelo and Crawford, you know what I mean? Which was on a Saturday. So cool. So everybody's planning to go to Farago's spot for the Cornello and Crawford fight. So of course, it comes to the time, that Saturday, you know what I mean, to go out to see a fight. So I'm getting dressed and shit. Officer Jones, Tamika calls me. And she was like, yo, what's up? I'm like, what's good? She was like, so you going to go see the fight, over at your friend's on spot? Because I took her there a few times, you know what I mean, when Farago would have like R&B night or something. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go see the fight. So I'm getting dressed. I got her on speaker. While I'm getting dressed, she was like, oh, okay. She was like, make sure you have a good time. I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, what you doing? She was like, nothing. I'll probably just be in the house, you know what I mean? Because, of course, her husband's busy, working as always. So I'm like, all right. I was like, why you just don't want to come to the spot and come watch the fight? She was like, nah, I'm not really into boxing and all that. But, she was like, so I'm talking to her the whole time. She was like, so, you dressed and all that. I was like, yeah, I'm about to walk out the door. So she was like, all right. So I was still talking to her on the phone. And she was like, you look good. I like your outfit. Then she started describing what I had on. I stopped. I'm like, huh? And then that's when she laughed and she flashed the car lights. I'm like, what the fuck? So, she gets out the car, you know what I mean? And she's walking up, you know what I mean? With this jacket. It was like a trench coat jacket and some heels. So she walks up. I'm like, what you doing here? And she was like, I was like, I thought you was in the house. She was like, I was. And, then she was like, till I started thinking about you. So I'm like, why you got on this jacket? I was like, it's kind of warm out here. She was like, yeah, it is. She was like, maybe I should take it off. Then she opened it. She butt-assed, and I'm like, balls. I'm looking to make sure the neighbors ain't looking. So that's when she walked up to me. We started tonguing. Boom, tonguing, boom, tonguing. So now we go back into, the condom. Now we fucking. I mean, we getting it in. Fucking. So boom. So, went a few rounds. So of course I never made it to Farago's spot to go see the fight. Cost money, the whole time. We getting it in. My phone ringing, but me, I don't answer the phone till I bust my nut. So, so we, after we had sex, we laying up and shit. But I ain't, I ain't think of nothing of it, you know what I mean? So, but the whole time, we chilling and laid up. this is what happened at the Farrago event. So Farrago and them, they, of course, it was a nice turnout. Everybody came to go to see the Crawford Canelo fight, whatever. So, from what I was told from Flame and Platinum and Farrago and from camera footage, they finish up the event, so they closing down. So now, Flame, Platinum, Farrago, and Biggest, who always does security for Farrago, who always shadows him around, they all leaving the spot. They leaving the spot. Farrago driver, Fat Terry. Fat Terry pulls up, in the car so that way Farrago could just get in and get out of it. Cause we treat Farrago like the president, So, as they leaving, this car pull up, the window roll down. It's Gooch, in the passenger seat. Gooch starts firing shots, pop, 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 pop. Hit Fat Terry in the arm. Fat Terry is Farrago driver. Boom, hit Fat Terry in the arm. Fat Terry screaming. So Gooch is just letting off mad shots, pop, pop, pop. Biggest pushes Farrago down to the ground, and Biggest gets on top of him. And then that's when Platinum pull out his gun. He starts firing back. Boom, boom, boom. Flame pull out his gun. He starts firing back. Boom, 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 boom. So, Gooch let off a few more shots. Boom, boom, boom. And then whoever was with Gooch, they drive off. So Gooch and, whoever driving him, they drive off. So that's when, Biggest get up and make sure, Farrago ain't hit. Farrago's not hit. He's good. So, Platinum and Flame ain't hit. They let off a few shots, but they don't think they got, at, Gooch, because, they got a bottle there. So Fat Terry, he's screaming. Fat Terry, the driver, he got shot in the arm, so fuck. So they get Fat Terry to the hospital. Boom, boom, boom. So as that is happening, I'm laying in the bed, sleep, my phone ringing. So I answered it. It's Platinum. So I'm like, yo, what up? Platinum like, yo. So Platinum explained to me what happened. I'm like, what? So he was like, yeah, that nigga Gooch that you had the problem with. That nigga came back, blazing, you know what I'm saying? Shot Fat Terry in the arm. I'm like, what the fuck? He was like, yeah, Farrago wanna see you, man. Farrago said to come to his spot. He wanna see you. So I'm like, fuck. So I'm like, alright, so, Tamika was sleeping in the bed, so I woke up, told her, yo, I'll be back, I gotta make a run. So she's like, alright, so Tamika, Officer, Jones, she laying in the bed sleeping. So I go over to Farrago house, with Platinum Flame, Biggest, and Farrago's at, a few other people. So Farrago like, yo, where the fuck was you at? I was like, I was laid up, chilling, I was on my way with it, I got caught up. He was like, you caught up with that officer chick, right? I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah. He was like, I've been hearing about you spending a lot of time with this officer chick. He was like, is this something you want to tell me? He was like, you ain't on the rap shit. I let that for a while, like, come on for a while, like, really? I was like, I ain't no motherfucking rap, man. It's just a bad bitch that happened to be a cop that I'm fucking. He was like, yeah, all right. He's like, well, that's when he gets into, Gooch coming through and shooting up, shooting at him in the spot. He was like, yo, he was like, I don't know what the fuck y'all got going on. But when that shit comes to my doorstep, we got a motherfucking problem. He was like, you done went and pulled the gun or did whatever at y'all a little event. Now this nigga coming through shooting at me and, at my establishment. He said, we got a motherfucking problem. He was like, yo, handle that motherfucking shit. Before the shit get worse, he was like, handle that shit. He was like, I don't give a fuck what y'all do. But when the motherfuckers start shooting at me, we got a problem. He was like, handle that shit. So I'm like, I got you. So that's when we all leave Farrago house. I go back to the condo, where Officer Jones is sleeping in the bed. Of course, in the morning we fuck again. Boom, 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 right? So now me and Platinum and Flame, we go pay Shortman a visit, because Shortman really know this nigga Gooch. We don't really know this, because me and Platinum ain't from Dallas. We just hustling out there. And Flame's from Dallas, but he don't know Gooch like that neither. So we go visit Shortman. Shortman, hey, what up? He's excited to see me. So I'm like, yo, Shortman, I like this nigga Gooch. We need information on this nigga, you know what I mean? I was like, where this nigga from? He was like, that Gooch is from, So, Shortman was like, that Gooch is from Woodtown. He don't know exactly where his house at, but he was like, he definitely from Woodtown. I'm like, you from Woodtown? I'm like, what's his real name? He was like, his name is Lewis Williams. And that's what we all busted out like, we like, Lewis Williams. I was like, so how you get the name Gooch? They said, cause he's like a bully, like, you know how you got the Gooch on different strokes? There was like, he's a bully, so they always call him Big Gooch. So I just laughed. I'm like, wow. I was like, so Lewis Williams, you from Woodtown, huh? He was like, yes. I'm like, yo. So I told Short Man, just stay off the block, lay low. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just lay low until shit cool off. So Short Man, like, alright. That's when me, Platinum, and Flame, we leave, and I was like, yo, I think I can get this nigga address. I was like, baby, Officer Jones could look him up. So they was like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's just, you know. So I call Officer Jones on speakerphone. You know what I mean? You know, Platinum and Flame sitting in the car with me. So calls Officer Jones, you know, she's at work or whatever. On this day, she's on desk duty, so I'm like, yo, is there a way you could look up a Lewis Williams for me in Woodtown? And she's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, to try to get information on him. I think, you know, he's been in trouble with the law, him and me. I just, you know, want to know if he's in his system. My friend want to know if he's in his system, if he's locked up. So she looked him up. And she was like, yeah, he's right. She was like, yeah, I see him right here. She was like, he's currently not, like, locked up, but he is on parole. And I was like, what's the address that's on file? She said, 3307 Aldenwood Drive. I said, 3307 Aldenwood Drive. She said, yeah, that's where he's paroled at. But she was like, you know, why, what's up? I was like, nah, my friend wanted to see, did he get in any trouble again? And, you know, but he seemed to be keeping his nose clean if he ain't locked up. She was like, yeah, true. So I was like, yo, I'ma holler at you. She was like, all right, for sure. So I get off the phone with, you know, with Tamika, you know what I mean? So I'm like, yo, I was like, she's saying he lives in 3307 Aldenwood Drive. So I was like, but if we gonna do this, we gotta do this a different kind of way. We just can't run up there. We gotta hit him with somebody he least suspected. So of course I get Sexy Trapper on the phone. I'm like, yo, Sexy Trapper, I'm gonna need a favor. So she like, alright. So Sexy Trapper, meet up with Sexy Trapper, come up with a plan. I'm like, yo, you know how we get down, you know what I mean? You know how Sexy Trapper put that work in, you know, for me with that, you know, with them dames. So she like, alright, cool. So we playing it for, you know, for like a late night. We gonna creep up on this nigga like 2, 3 in the morning. So cool. So you got Flame driving, me in the passenger seat, Platinum in the back seat. And Sexy Trapper, you know, we went, picked her up, she gets in the back seat. You know, she got like this red wig on, some sunglasses, a hoodie, and like a COVID mask, you know what I mean? So we drive it over to where, you know, Gooch live at. So we pull up nice and slow. We see Gooch sitting in front of his house, you know what I mean? He just vibing, smoking a black and mild, drinking Don Julio. You know, with this speaker sitting on the side of him blasting Young Jeezy, you know what I mean? He was playing like Young Jeezy and Boopsy and all that shit. So he just vibing, you know what I mean? Just smoking and drinking, vibing, you know, chilling at the crib. You know, they say he lived with his mother and his sister. His sister worked nights and his mother, you know, I guess was there. I don't know. She was there, didn't give a fuck. So Gooch is sitting in front of the house. Gooch sitting in front of the house in a lawn chair. With the speaker, like I said, blasting, you know what I mean, all that gangster music, Jeezy, Boopsy, you know, Yo Gotti, all that type of shit, smoking the black and mild, drinking Don Julio. So I'm screwing the suppressor, on the Glock. You know, I reach back and pass it to Sexy Trapper. I'm like, you already know what to do, baby. She takes it, you know, she takes the Glock with the suppressor on the tip. She like, for sure. So she gets out. So now, Sexy Trapper's walking real slow up the block with the COVID mask on, the red wig, you know what I mean, the hoodie, you know what I mean, sweatpants on, you know what I mean, you know, ass jiggling a little bit. But, you know, Gooch ain't noticed her walking up because he's so busy listening to the music, vibing to the music and saying the lyrics with his eyes closed. You know what I mean, with the Don Julio bottle in his hand, sitting in the chair. You know what I mean, just swaying. You know what I mean? So I guess he was looking at his phone to change the song. And then that's what Sexy Trapper seen, her opportunity. So she takes out the Glock. She walks up, starts firing. Pat, 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 but you can't hear it. Cause not only the music is loud, blasting, but like I said, I put the suppressor on it, so it's like a silencer. So it's like tap, 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 tap. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? She let off about 12 shots. At least 9 of them hit his ass. You know what I mean? So now she's speed walking back to the car. Music still blasting. You know what I mean? He just laying there, head back. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Don Julio bottle on the ground, broken. You know what I mean? Speaker blasting. And then she's getting the call. We take off. We drive off. Get the fuck up out of there. So now we chilling. We chilling the next day. Remember I got a spot, like a spot where I would have Platinum record, you know what I mean? So I had like this little spot where it was like a studio in there, little game room with with the Tekken and the Mortal Kombat, arcade, type style games, plus the pool table, plus we had the big ass TV with the PS5 and shit. So the next day after that, we just chilling. You know what I mean? We listening to, the latest songs that Platinum just recorded, are in the studio, you know what I mean? So we blasting Platinum's music. Flame and Sexy Trapper sitting on the couch, they playing the video game, on the PS5. I'm shooting pool with another one of my homies, we shooting pool. So, of course, what I mean, officers, Tamika Jones hit me up. She was like, yo, where you at? I'm like, I'm at, at the studio, at my spot, this studio. You know what I mean? With Platinum, he was just recording, I was up. She was like, I need to see you. So I gave her the address, told her to come through. So she comes through. So I told somebody to go let her in. They go let her in. She comes in. I could see she's mad as a motherfucker. She was like, yo, I need to talk to you. I'm like, so everybody's looking like, what, Sexy Trapper and Flame, they got the controllers in their hand because they playing PS5. They looking back like, what? So Platinum looking at, like, what's going on, you know what I mean? So I put the pool stick down. I'm like, all right. So I would, I follow her in the back. We go in like my little office. She was like, yo, she was like, that fucking, that person you had me look up, Lewis Williams, you know what I mean? That address or whatever. She was like, that motherfucker wind up dead. She was like, is that the same Lewis Williams you had me look up? I was like, I don't know, maybe why was up? She was like, she was like, he's dead. Like, she was like, yo, I hope you ain't gonna get me caught up in no murder. Like, what the fuck do you got going? I'm like, yo, first of all, relax. I was like, I don't know what you talk about. And secondly, maybe it's just a coincidence. A nigga is a hardened criminal. What the fuck? She was like, she just looking at me like I'm lying. She was like, no. So we arguing back and forth. So she was like, yo, don't get me caught up in no shit. I could lose my fucking career for that. I'm like, yo, well, you need to relax. So she went to walk. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away from me. So I'm following behind her. So she's storming out. I'm following behind her. Everybody's looking like, what? So I follow her to her car. She sits in the car. She was like, move. She trying to close the door. I'm like, nah. So I squat down between the door and her. And I'm like, talking to her. So I get her to calm down. I get her to calm down. I rub her legs, start finger popping her, kissing her. So of course she's getting horny again. She forgets all about it, you know what I mean? I'm finger popping her and shit. So now we go back in the spot. We walk past everybody. Now we in the office, fucking, boom. Get in and fucking, boom. So that kind of, she felt good. So she was like, that was some good dick. But she said, still, don't get me caught up in no murder. I was like, look, I don't know what you're talking about. So I kissed her. And then that's what she said. She had to get up out of there. She got to, be at work in a few hours. So she left. So they was like, everything cool. I'm like, yeah, everything good. Everything should be copacetic. How he said it. So we all started laughing. Cool. You know what I mean? So one day I get a call from a number I don't know. So I answer the phone. I'm like, hello. And then what it was Tamika's husband called me. It was like, yo, I noticed my wife's been calling you, and I've been pinging her, her phone, and she's been spending time with you, you and my wife having an affair. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he was like, come on, bro. So we kind of, I denied it, so he like, all right. So one day, me and Tamika, we back at the, at the spot, where we first went, the swinger spot, we chilling. Having a good time. Next thing you know, her husband pops up. You're like, whoa. So that's when, of course he's arguing. He's, arguing. They trying to calm him down, you know what I mean? Because I guess one of the guys that was there, that also was a cop, recognized Tamika. But it was his first time being there, and I guess he went back and told us, I could have sworn I saw your wife, you know what I mean? Because I guess, Eric Johnson had an event to where, that's where, her husband took her to that event, and I guess one of them officers recognized her from there, and then he was at the swinger party too, and told, her husband, and then that's when he was bitching and beefing about. So that's why I guess she told him, you always busy, you don't spend time, da 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 da, we don't have fun no more, all that shit. So we got them both to calm down, but she didn't want to go home with him because she was scared, so she didn't go home with him, so eventually she went home with him, and then, she called me, it was like, yo, you know what I mean, he wants to work things out, he promised to spend more time with her. So she said that me and her can't really kick it like that, cause, she agreed not to, do what she been doing with me or at the swinger parties and shit because he gonna make things right. Alright, cool. So of course, eventually, she winds up telling me they gonna move out of Dallas. He wants to, move to Los Angeles. So I'm like, wow, Los Angeles. She was like, yeah, they're gonna have a fresh new start. You know what I mean? They're gonna, move to California. So I'm like, alright, cool. I'm wishing her the best. Cool. So Tamika and her husband, they move out to Cali, fresh new start. Alright, cool. So now, mind you, it's been like 6-7 months since I heard from, Officer Jones. I done moved on with my life, course, still doing my thing in the street. Fucking different women and shit, still doing my thing, carrying on as normal. I missed, Officer Jones, but, all good things come to an end, she definitely got me over London, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, alright, fuck it, I gotta get over another one, you know what I mean? So, like I said, it's 6-7 months later, I get a phone call, from Tamika, which I'm surprised, like, yo, hey, what's up? So we, kicking it on the phone. I'm like, how you been? She's like, everything good. So I'm like, what's up? She was like, yeah, she just wanted to call, see how I was doing, and also to let me know that she's 7 months pregnant, and that she believes the child is mine.